Welcome to an SFB Addict video.
Okay, this is a fleet action game, a couple of Kzinti ships versus a couple of Klingon ships. We accidentally forgot to start recording the video until the 24th impulse of the first turn. So basically the Kzinti launched a couple scatter packs. Those scatter packs blossomed. There's 12 drones on the board. The Kzintis came in fast, then slowed down. The Klingons, on the other hand, came in slow and then started to speed up. There's been no firing yet. Basically, all the first turn was to close the distance between the two fleets. Now the playback here is happening at about 400%. And at this point, the Kzintis are launching a couple of ECM drones. Type 3, the last 6 turns. Speed 20s are the fastest drones that are being used. I tried putting in 6 plus 3 equals 9 for the ECM. And then decided to add the total ECM column instead. And found out that 6 plus 3 equals 9 screws up the total ECM column so that it doesn't parse it the way it should be, or the way we wanted it to be, I should say. So now we had to change it. Now the Kzintis are deciding on what ship they should shoot at. Now we were using Discord for voice. Which ship has got more power available, which one's got more batteries, which one can put up a bigger brick, change the EW more. And typically what we were doing as a Klingon, or as Kzintis here, was we were targeting the D7 with all the drones. So either that ship will pop a weasel and fall behind, or it would have to use up a lot of its fire on the drones. It also happened to have the ADDs. So it was the most logical one to designate as the plague ship for the drones. And we were basically trying to concentrate the direct fire on the small ship. But because of the electronics situation for EW, it just happened that the D7 was the better choice up to this point. Now there was actually a Klingon shuttle launch of a scatter pack at some point here, but they did some sort of a oddball release condition on the scatter pack. Something like the drones had to reach a certain distance, and because of their maneuvering, it never did. I think at the end of the turn here, it had a confusing turn of direction for the Klingons where they were moving their ships, and I think that ended up having to do with what they were doing with their shuttle, their scatter pack. I think they were trying to loop back, get behind it so that it could be used, but the turn of the battle, what events happened, kind of threw a monkey wrench in that. At this point, the Klingons are kind of discussing what their strategy is going to be. I suspect that what we ended up doing kind of threw a monkey wrench in what they were originally planning, and then had to come up with a new plan at the last moment. I think this is where they are about to launch some Klingon drones. Yes, playing against drone users has points of tedium where you have to wait for them to do things with their drones. Eventually I kind of figured out that the best way to sort the columns was on owner rather than speed and things like that. And even though we were on Discord and we could use voice to say ready, etc., it ends up having a lot of people talk over one another. And here I was trying to add my drones one by one to groups and then move it, but it ended up moving the entire group as I was moving the drone, which is how those drones are going forward, and I didn't notice it, and then I started trying to put them all back, and it just made a mess of things. So move all your drones, then add them to the group all together. So here I ended up having to undo what I was doing, which was a real pain in the butt. So yeah, I figured it might have been easier to grab a drone, move it, designate it as part of a group. Grab another drone, designate it as part of the group. Almost worked out. If I had grabbed the drone, moved it, put it in the group, grabbed the next drone, moved it, then added it to the group, it would have worked out. But I was grabbing the drone, adding it to the group, and then attempting to move it, which ended up moving the other drones that were already in the group. Complete foobar situation. So that's me undoing everything and making sure that I had them all undone or redone or trying to re-add them properly. In the end, we just decided that groups for the drones wasn't working out too well because putting it in a group for some reason was not reporting the drone movements properly. So one drone would move and it would report the other 5 drones as having not moved even though they had. So there's a lot of drone drama going on here as we were trying to fix all that up. I like the concept of Kzinti, but it's a lot of paperwork in terms of shuffling drones around on the board. It's part of the reason why I think a lot of Kzinti players just hold off on launching their drones until they get to point blank range and then launching. And here we were talking about the black square that surrounds the counters. Some of them were saying that they're on Linux as well, and when it zooms in, those black things disappear. It's never been the case for me on my computer. It used to be SFBOL used 6 different graphics per piece, and it didn't have that black thing. But then the creator of the interface or client discovered how to rotate the images. So instead of using 6 separate images, just used the one and rotated it. It ended up reducing the number of graphics that were being used by the client, reducing memory usage, but it introduced that black outline. And as we turned the group, we also discovered that some of the drones in the group weren't being turned. So we ended up having to change facings manually. And it was shortly after this that we decided to get rid of it. And here's where the Klingons turned away, which completely bewildered us. It's a floating map, so I suspect they were planning on going direction A, then direction F to get behind the shuttle scatter pack to use their drones to take out our drones. At this point, we were looking at, well, hey, they're not going to be firing disruptors at us. They're probably going to be facing that direction for a fair amount of time next turn. So instead of firing at the Klingon D7, let's fire at the F5. And here I messed up in my fire orders. I forgot to change my electronic warfare status to counter the D5's ECM, but oh well. You'll find out in a moment. So I did say it in the order right there. I typed it in. I just saw in the video a second ago. See, bumped ECCM to 1. Yeah, because of all the canceling of the activity window here by one of the players, I ended up forgetting to add that back in. I actually sent a suggestion back to the creator of the client to not allow players to hit the cancel button on an activity once they've clicked execute. That they should have to be required to ask their opponents or teammates to cancel it, for those of them that were still in the process of doing it. It does happen where people type in orders and they get left out because of the multiple openings of that. I think I even drained my battery for the ECCM and then forgot that it disappeared, or then found out that it disappeared from the orders, and I think I forgot to put the power back. So I literally threw away a point of power from battery there because of that. And I think I foobarred because I think the Kzinti CCH actually had a straight shot, maybe. I forgot. And the DD didn't, and I think we ended up applying the shift that the DD had to all of the weapons. Well, it got a little bit confusing there at the end of turn 1. But anyway, we did about 19 points of damage to the D5 shields, and I think they did, what, 1 internal? We struck a forward hull. If anything, we would have got maybe 3-4 more hits, and they probably just would have been more hulls out where he probably wouldn't have made a difference. So that's how we did our EA. Turn 1, we came in fast and slowed down. Now we have speed 20 ECM drones out, so we don't want to go beyond speed 20. That's why on the first turn, our slow speed didn't go below 10. And here, since the Klingons turned away, we decided that we were going to sort of either turn F or side slip in direction F to try and get behind the Klingon ships rather than going directly up. And we were going to go in and we were going to start shooting down the drones, but the closure rates didn't quite work out. And then we found out where the targets of the Klingon drones actually were. Or at least some of them. Yeah, and here we were just kind of curious as to what was going on with the Klingon disruptors, because if they had them armed, they had to dissipate them if they didn't fire them. Okay, so at this point I'm going to grab the energy allocation that I have a copy of at the end of the video, I'm going to plug it in here. So let me stop my audio recording and pause the video, and we'll insert that to this point. All right, here is the EA for the D7 for turn 1 and turn 2. And as we can see here, the D7 armed standard disruptors on turn 1. The contingent allocated part of an HET. And they were holding 2 wild weasels. Okay, turn 2, they come in with 1 overload, 3 standards. And not much more there. Okay, so here's the energy allocation for the Kzinti CCH. Turn 1, standard disruptors. No special shuttles, other than scatter packs. Turn 2, standard disruptors. 1 point each for ECM, ECCM. Not much more there, other than recharging the phasers that were fired. And here's the A for the F5. So turn 1, no disruptors armed. They bricked their number 1 by 3 points. They paid for tractors. And they have a wild weasel armed. Turn 2, they armed their disruptors. Recharged the batteries. Contingent allocated to tractor. Put up 2 ECM. Continued holding a wild weasel. So not much there. Klingon discharges 4 standard disruptors into space. And here we have the energy allocation form for the Kzinti destroyer for turn 2. So as we saw, turn 1, 2 standard disruptors, half a point into reinforcement as a contingent, 6 defensive ECM, and no special shuttles. And then we have 4 phasers being recharged, turn 2, 2 standard disruptors, recharging batteries, half a point contingent and tractor beam, 1 and 1 for defensive electronics, and that's the end of it. And during the turn, at some point, 2 points will be used for ECCM. And we have turn 2 starting. Speed 17s on the D7, speed 20 for the Kzinti DD and CCH, and the F5 is speed 19. And of course, as usual, a lot of the action is just drones being moved on the board. And here the Kzinti player finally got fed up with the groups not properly recording the drones being moved and is removing them from the grouping stack. Once this is done, that's the last that we have to deal with that. The Kzinti player just simply moved all the drones individually from that point on to the end of the game. So Gatchaman and Ramon are the Klingons. And they have just launched some drones by the look of it. Yep, drones added, direction D. Looks like 4 drones. Okay, so here we see the Kzintis have turned direction F to get behind the Klingons and take on the drones. And here the Kzinti player was looking at putting their special drones, one per stack kind of thing, and separating them just in case a T-bomb is deployed. And the Klingons turn down. Now you notice the Klingon drones are not, the first stack are not going towards the Kzinti drones, but the second stack of drones are. So they've turned towards the drones. And here we start having ADD fire at drones to take them out. And because it's so hard to see what drones are in the stack kind of thing for targeting, and because the targeting window often prevents you from flipping over to other windows, we started reading off what the drones were in what hexes so that that could be put into the firing orders. At least that was the intention. May have ended up annoying my teammate by reading them off. Finally, we just decided copying and pasting the name of the unit into the chat area was the easier way of doing it. At some point here, the Klingon drones kind of miss their targets, or the drones are maneuvered in such a way that the Klingon actually gets behind its target and ends up facing the wrong way, doing an HET or something like that. We weren't paying too much attention to the Klingon drones that were chasing our drones. And the Kzintis here end up having really bad luck with some of their ADD shots. So we're looking to see how many drones are still there, who moves next. And because we're on Discord, there's a nasty habit of verbally saying this fire's on this unit, and of course that ended up not going into the chat, so people watching the video kind of didn't see it, which is why we started typing in what was happening. So there we have a Klingon drone that just slipped in behind all the other drones because it was, instead of leading the target kind of thing as much as possible, it was kind of following the target. And it ended up falling in behind them. And of course here we are trying to find the units that haven't moved and get them to be moved. Once you have a lot of drones stacked up on top of one another, especially if they're targeted on one another, it can get a little confusing as to where things go or what's been moved. I believe right here the Kzinti is looking for one of his drones that has not moved yet. And there we were just giving the unit names of the drones that were in the same hex as the Klingon drones, just in case the Klingon drones in the same hex were targeted on those drones. And you notice there that we put the label of the drone into chat so we could then grab it for the target. But here the Klingon player actually removed the drone before the fire happened. So the client wouldn't let us actually fire the weapon at it. So we ended up saying that it was being fired at the shuttle. That's the drone that kept being missed by the ADDs from the CCH. And the Kzinti's just turned up. And the Klingon just turned down. And again, a lot of drones being moved all into the same stack, same hexes, and then trying to find out whether or not they've hit targets. And it's actually ended up being that the Klingons are risking mutual impact because their drones fell behind the Kzinti drones. And they're getting to the point where they may enter the same hex as the Klingon ship. That side slip there by the Klingon D7 actually gave them a good chance here to take out a Phaser 2 drone, or sorry, Phaser 3 drone before it fired. Because if they had simply gone forward, it would have been range 2 and would have fired. But they ended up taking it out with an ADD because of that side slip. And they're shooting more drones. Finding the pieces, removing them as they get shot. And again, that unit name, Scatterpack DD001, etc., that was us saying that these two drones are in the same hex as other drones. Just in case the Klingon drones were hitting them to kill them. And they weren't. And they was about to send a message to the Klingon players that if one of the two of them was better at moving drones and tracking drones to see which drones were targeted on what drones, etc., that they might want to transfer ownership to that one player and they can just simply handle all the drones. I think they replied back they're both about as equally inexperienced moving drones or something along those lines. Just trying to be helpful. Again, the video is playing back at 400%, so a lot of the time you see here on the video that seems like a long time was even longer in the actual face-to-face game at real time. Now we got more fire happening at drones. And there we had the Phaser 3 drone, just shot the Klingons number 1. And for a moment there, I think we got confused as to which drone was the Phaser drone, thinking that the ADD was firing at it, but at the very end we realized that no, the Phaser drone was shot down by phasers, and the ADD shot still needed to be rolled, and then we ended up rolling it at the end of it all. Of course, because there's so many units being discarded and so many rolls, kind of made it hard to see that the Klingon actually did take damage to his number 1 there, dropping it from 30 to 29. And here at this point, the Klingons have actually got drones still on the board that were targeted on drones that just got shot down. So they'll be removing them from the board here in a moment. Oh, here's our log where we put in the special notes for our Phaser 2 drones. Basically, we set it up so that all the Phaser 3 drones, or not Phaser 2, Phaser 3 drones, were all firing at range 2. If they can survive to get past the ADD at range 3, a second shot of ADDs at range 2 is probably going to kill them. They're probably not going to make it to range 1, so that's where we were setting them to fire, was range 2. Better odds of hitting at range 1, but not by much. And here the Klingons are actually putting in a lot of fire orders because there's a lot of drones right in front of them. And I think the Klingons actually get desperate enough here that they are firing heavy weapons at drones in the fire orders that are about to pop up. And for some reason the F5 decided it wanted to lay a mine. It's like, okay. The Klingons actually had 2 T-bombs in their commander's options. It would have actually been a better option a few hexes back for the F5 to drop its number 1 shield and transport out that T-bomb so that the T-bomb took out most of those drones. So I think for most of this, the F5's number 1 is not facing the 2 Kzinti ships. Yes, that is correct. For most of that, it was far enough back. And here we had some sort of resync happen, and it ended up showing that Nightstorm user-defined ship had been added. We were trying to figure out what the hell happened because nobody had deliberately hit the resync button, and it just kind of popped up there. It's like, what the hell happened? I think that might have been my client, because at some point here the fire order was revealed, but I didn't see it. And then this user-defined thing happened. So they ended up copying and pasting the order into the chat area so that I could see it for the video to record it. So you're going to see that happen here in a moment. So all that fire order stuff, that has all been received already, so I had to cancel it. I just sent a picture of it to the Discord chat. That's me typing that in for you, the video watcher here. Yeah, so a couple of drones got killed. Well, there's so many things being echoed to chat, it kind of makes it hard to see it on the video, so especially in a fleet action. Less so when it's a single ship duel versus single ship duel, but anyway. And Phaser 2s kill the destroyer's drone. And then we were just identifying what drone got hit by how much. So 3 drones just got removed. And Klingon drones just got dropped. Okay, so the Klingon firing the disruptors at drones didn't happen there. I think that happens when this next stack comes up. And here we're just identifying what drones are there. And we were all commenting at this point that we didn't like the way that the client was naming drones, because drones that were coming from the scatter pack ended up having similar names as to drones that were launched from the ship. So one would say scatter pack drone number 4, or the other one would say the name of the ship, drone 4. We kind of would have preferred that if the drones were just all labeled by numbers, so that way there wasn't a 4 and a 4, just they were like 1 through the X and number. And then you had the same thing happening with the drones for the destroyer as for the CCH. And yes, I do believe here is where the Klingon is firing the disruptors at drones. Klingons have got great arcs, but even they don't have enough phasers to take down 2 scatter packs worth of drones all in the same turn. Although the ADDs there do help. Yeah, so an overloaded disruptor and a standard disruptor at drones, an ADD, another disruptor, and that is a heavy weapon at a small target that gives 4 ECM, but the Klingon ship had enough ECCM that it ended up being only a shift of 1, and it didn't matter. The roll that missed would have missed anyway, and the roll that hit, even with the shift, still hit. There we go, 2 drones removed. Now we're looking at the other fire. So turn to Impulse 21, waiting on fire orders. And my teammate there asked if we were firing. I do believe I said no, not yet. And here the Kzintis all decide to make the commitment and turn in. Time for the overrun. This turn coming up, the Klingons are going to be rearming a lot of weapons. So they'll be a little bit shorter on power, so they're probably going to be going slower. It would have actually been a good idea for them to come in speed 4 this upcoming turn and make use of those weasels that they had. But that didn't happen. I think the Klingon D7 kind of realized the danger that they were in here at this point and decided to turn away. This isn't such a good idea for the F5 because the F5 has got a damaged number 3 shield that we shot up at the end of turn 1, and by turning away he will put that shield towards us. What the F5 should have done there is it should have continued to go forward, side slip, forward, side slip, forward, side slip, right up to the point where that shield boundary was just about to cross the Kzinti, and then on its next movement, then turned. That way there was a chance that it could have got the turn in without ever presenting the down shield. But anyway, the Kzintis are going to shoot up that down shield in a moment. And just in case the Klingon F5 bumps up its ECM level, the DD is bumping up its ECCM here to make sure. And I just noticed that because of his speed here, he's not going to move a couple impulses, and the CCH could have done some Mizia shots and got more alpha rolls, but we decided just to go ahead and dump it all in all at the same time. And that's the order in which I'm firing my weapons, and rolled them. I'm looking for the chart here for adding up the weapons. So 9 plus 9 plus 6 for 24 damage. All going internal. And the Kzinti's turn down to continue the chase. And the Kzinti just turned, so that brought another phaser 1 to bear, so we tried taking a pot shot with it, and it ended up missing. On the F5, quickly changed direction. And as the ends of the turn here, we're going to launch some drones. That Type 1 FM, that's the phaser drone, phaser 3. And that DD is at range 10 here at the end of the turn. So what we were commenting on is that we were looking to burst speed up to like 31 or something like that to get within range 8, and then fire, and then crash down on our speed. And then just continue our practice of dumping all the drones at the D7 so that it has to deal with the drones rather than firing at our ships. And here we're taking a look at what impulse that we can do the firing on. So we fired on the 26th. So we could fire on the second or the third impulse on. So we decided to come in 31 for the first 5 or so, or 27 for the first 5 movements. Speed 27 and 31 all have the same number of movements in the first 6 impulses. And then we would crash down. And right now we're having a discussion with the CCH captain with how much power he would need in order to rearm everything, overload everything, and do movement. Here's where we decide on 27 crashing down to 14, then down to 7, and then again down a little bit more so that it only uses 12 points of movement, which is what the CCH required in order to do everything that it wanted to do. Okay, so the Kzinti DD overloads disruptors, pays for electronics, recharges his phasers. Charges up his batteries as much as possible. And that's the end of that. Now we look at the CCH's energy allocation form for turn 3. So recharging phasers by 7, overloaded disruptors, recharging batteries by 4, dropping electronics, and basically doing a speed plot to go that same speeds that the Kzinti DD was going. And now we have the K5L Glory's energy allocation form, turn 3. So it looks like they dropped in power. Didn't arm their disruptors. Put a little bit into movement. Contingent allocated HET. Or directly allocated HET. 1 in defensive. And they've dropped arming the Weasel. Now we're looking at the D7's turn 3. Standard disruptors, recharge phasers. Allocated an HET directly. Recharged a little bit of power and battery. 6 cutting. So they are planning on turning and fighting, even though they have to recharge and are unable to put in enough power for overloaded disruptors, and the other ship doesn't have disruptors armed at all. Okay, now we begin our turn 3. And we reveal speeds, 27s, 12s, 16s. So the Kzintis are coming in fast, the Klingons are coming in slow. And here the ECM drone for the Kzinti for some reason didn't go up to speed 20. When the Kzinti ship itself went up to 27, it stayed at 14, and that caused a bit of confusion as to what drone in the stack was what. I'm assuming we're moving the drones all on speed 20 for that 14, but we may have actually missed some movements, but it doesn't really matter much. I don't think the ECM drone for the Kzinti DD would have mattered much at all. So you might see the Kzinti DD forgetting to move his ECM drone at speed 20 and accidentally moving one at 14 instead of 20. Okay, so we have the Klingons doing their HET to come down and in. Don't know what they were thinking when they did that, but that's what they decided to do. We're getting the CCH to come up and turn away from the D7 a little bit. Okay, so the Kzintis are more than able to fire at this point. I think that's what the Klingons were kind of hoping to do, was get in close before we could fire. They just didn't have the speed, and we fired too early near the end of the turn, the 26th impulse, not the 32nd, so that didn't work out for them. Even if it was the 32nd that we fired on, it's the 7th impulse now, so that wouldn't have really helped them out much. Just a bad combination of speeds and situation there. And the Kzinti's now dropped down to speed 14. And this, of course, is going to allow those drones to catch up and get in front. The fact that the Klingons are coming towards the drones helped. The DD would probably have been better off going a little bit slower and actually arming its weapons as disruptors. So that way the D7 would have been out in front a little bit, or a little bit more. I kind of suspect they were hoping that we would overkill the DD and have the explosion take out the drones and damage our ships. That's about the only thing I can think that they might have been trying to do with the tactic they're pulling here. Or the tactics that they're pulling here. Because it does indeed seem like the F5 is being sent out to the slaughter. And here the Kzinti DD has got the firing opportunity on that down shield. And we are carefully calculating out our damage so as to damage the F5 but not blow it up. I think 32 would have blown up the F5, and we got 28 out of 4 weapons, 2 disruptors and 2 phasers. Yeah, hitting excess damage. Not much left. A bridge and a little bit more. So yeah, there that would have definitely taken out the first stack of drones. I think that they were thinking they were going to get at least one more movement, and then we would have blown them up at maybe range 1 or something. And that would have damaged our ships and taken out all the drones all in the same hex. Now the Klingons are realizing, oh crap, the D7 now has to deal with all those drones. And of course here is some of the ADD fire and phaser fire and all that that's coming out at the drones. The CCH has double drone control, so it can control 12. The Kzinti has single drone control, so it can control 6 for 18 total. And basically the Klingons are obliging by shooting down enough drones that we don't even have to worry about transferring control. As you all know, when the Kzinti gets to range 0 or 1, it's got more drone launches that it's going to perform. With ship killer drones. And of course, it got to the point where stacks of drones are getting confusing with all the counters. There is something to be said for the Vassal client where you can simply double click on a stack and it separates out all the pieces and you can grab any one of them and move it. Unfortunately, the SFBOL client doesn't have that implemented. And that Phaser 3 drone is now firing at the D7. There's 2 in that stack if I remember correctly. 2 single space explosive, 2 Phaser 3 drones. Phaser 3 drones don't do much damage, but they annoy the hell out of your opponent. Because by the time that phaser drone gets to the point where it fires its phasers, the Klingon has wasted ADDs at least twice on it. Or worse than ADDs, has wasted actual phaser fire on it. And the Klingon D7 continues shooting down drones. At this point, the F5 is a floating hulk in space. Next turn, it doesn't have any power to really go anywhere or do anything, so we could launch drones at it or try and capture it with boarding parties at our leisure. And the Klingon D7 turns in. And of course, that was in order to get his disruptors to bear. I don't know, it might have been better for him to fire his disruptors at a slightly farther distance out and then turn away to run. But he's decided to turn in. I guess he decided today was a good day to die. He's literally approaching 2 Kzinti ships that have the ability to launch 12 drones and 2 scatter packs. All in this turn. And he's already shot down 8 drones, or has already tried to deal with 8 drones. Oh, here we had some sort of client glitch where the F5 player had to leave. So he transferred control to the D7 player. And we're trying to find the SSD in the list, but we're not doing it. So no matter where we go, we're not seeing it. And it's because we didn't notice that it's actually still there as the player that's left as the F5. But on the Klingon player, we have 2 tabs, and now we figured it out. So that opponent SSD's Ramon should have actually been removed when that player left the game, but for some reason it stayed. But at least it did put the F5 and the D7 both into the Gotcha Man tab. But it was confusing as hell there for everyone going, what the hell? Where is that ship? Because we were trying to look at where the phaser fire was applied for the Klingon, and we weren't seeing it on the appropriate shield, and that's because he accidentally applied it to the F5. And then we figured it all out and got it straightened out. And the Kzinti DD nearly loses its front shield. Had to put in a couple points of battery power to keep the shield up. Now the Klingon D7 is facing a different shield entirely on the DD. You notice the Klingons didn't launch any drones this turn. The one turn where it may have actually made a difference and actually caused us to waste some fire on drones, and they didn't launch them. So I think at this point they kind of had suicidal intentions from the beginning of the turn. But anyway, here is the Kzinti DD, looking at what his options are. There's some synchronization issues going on there. I think we were trying to get the 2 points of damage to show up on the D7, and it wasn't. And I think we ended up asking the Klingon player to log out and completely reload the client and log back in. Yeah, his D7 wasn't showing up at all on his side. That's what it was. And here the Kzinti player is firing everything else that bears, which was 2 phaser 1s and a phaser 3 at range 1. I think it was a straight shot for 15 damage. And there's already 5 points of damage. Sorry, no. There's a couple points of damage already from the phaser fire from the drones. That's why it wasn't 22, it's a 20. So that drops his shield to 5 points. And the 4 drones that the Kzinti DD just launched before that fire. Two double space drones and 2 single space drones. What was just launched are about to come raining down on that Klingon. There we go, and that's 72 damage to a 5-point shield. Oh, that was the Kzinti just revealing all the drones. And that's 1 hurt D7. It does still have power left though, so it can still move. And the thing is, the Kzinti CCH hasn't fired yet. And the CCH is also off that down shield. And here is the CCH dumping its weapons into that D7. Now we were just discussing how much damage to pump into it, whether or not to blow it up or to let it live and then kill it later. And then we realized the Kzinti's got a fresh shield. It's probably not going to do more than 20 damage, so we said, go ahead, just kill it. And the D7 blows up, and we quickly look up what the explosion strength is going to be for the D7. 19 points. And we apply that damage. But anyway, at this point, the Klingons saying, why are you bothering continuing to call the impulses? The game's over at this point. But that was the game. 2 Klingon ships annihilated, 2 Kzinti ships, no real internal damage.